You know what's fascinating? In a world of smartphones, artificial intelligence, and scientific breakthroughs that would have seemed miraculous just a century ago, billions of people still wake up every morning with a profound and enduring belief in a man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, not as a historical figure, not as a philosophical teacher, but as something deeply, personally, and profoundly real in their everyday lives. They talk to him, they trust him with their pain, they make life-changing decisions based on what they believe he is calling them toward. And when everything falls apart, and it does fall apart, he is the first place they turn. And here is what makes this so psychologically fascinating. These are not naive people. These are not uneducated people. These are doctors, scientists, professors, artists, and some of the most intellectually sophisticated human beings who have ever lived. So what is actually happening inside the minds and brains of people who believe in Jesus Christ? What does psychology and neuroscience say about one of the most powerful and enduring human experiences in all of recorded history? That is exactly what this video is about. To understand this experience properly, we need to start where the science starts, not with theology, not with philosophy, but with the brain itself. Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist at Thomas Jefferson University, has spent decades studying what happens inside the brain during religious experience. His field, neurotheology, uses brain imaging technology to observe what occurs neurologically when people pray, worship, or experience what they describe as a felt sense of divine presence. What his research consistently shows is remarkable. During deep prayer and worship, the brain does not go quiet, it activates. The frontal lobes, associated with focused attention and meaningful thought, show increased activity, while simultaneously certain regions associated with the boundaries of the self show decreased activity, creating what researchers describe as a feeling of unity, of connection with something larger than oneself. For people who believe in Jesus Christ, this neurological experience is not imagined, it is measurable, it is real, and it is one of the most profound states the human brain is capable of producing. This is where the science begins, and it is already more interesting than most people expect. For most people who hold a deep belief in Jesus Christ, the relationship did not begin in a single dramatic moment. It developed, often slowly, often through a combination of upbringing, personal experience, and a specific kind of searching that psychology finds deeply meaningful. Research in developmental psychology shows that children raised in households where faith in Jesus Christ is modeled consistently develop what psychologists call a religious schema, a deeply embedded cognitive and emotional framework through which they interpret experience, find meaning, and understand their place in the world. This framework does not simply sit in the mind as an idea, it becomes part of the architecture of how reality itself is experienced. But here is what makes this psychologically even more interesting. Faith in Jesus Christ does not only develop in childhood. Research consistently shows that some of the most profound and lasting transformations of belief happen in adulthood, often at moments of significant personal crisis. Dr. William James, whose foundational work on the psychology of religious experience at Harvard University established the framework that researchers still build on today, described what he called the twice-born experience. The person who arrives at deep faith not through gradual formation but through a crisis, a loss, a breakdown, a moment where the structures of ordinary life collapsed completely, and found in Jesus Christ something that nothing else in their experience could provide. What James observed across hundreds of documented cases was consistent. The crisis did not create weakness, it created opening, and into that opening something entered that permanently reorganized the person's entire inner world. Now here is where it gets most fascinating. Because one of the most distinctive features of belief in Jesus Christ is the profoundly personal nature of the relationship believers describe. They do not simply follow a set of teachings, they describe knowing Him, feeling His presence, being guided by Him in decisions large and small, experiencing a quality of being understood that no human relationship has fully matched. Psychologically, this experience maps closely onto what attachment researchers call a secure attachment relationship. Dr. Lee Kirkpatrick, whose research examined the relationship between human attachment patterns and religious belief, found something extraordinary. For many people, Jesus Christ functions psychologically as what attachment theory calls a safe haven and secure base, a relationship that provides comfort in distress, clarity in uncertainty, and a felt sense of being unconditionally known and loved. Now pause here for a moment. This does not reduce belief in Jesus Christ to mere psychology. What it reveals is something remarkable about the human being itself. that we are wired, neurologically, emotionally, and developmentally, for exactly the kind of relationship that believers in Jesus Christ describe experiencing. A relationship of unconditional love, of perfect understanding, of presence that does not abandon or condition its acceptance. Whether that relationship points to something beyond psychology is a question science cannot and does not attempt to answer, but that the experience itself is real, neurologically measurable, and profoundly transformative, that the research confirms without question. And here is where the science becomes genuinely difficult to ignore. The psychological and physical benefits associated with deep belief in Jesus Christ are among the most consistently replicated findings in health psychology. Not because researchers set out to prove religion right or wrong, but because the data keeps pointing in the same direction regardless of who is collecting it or where. Dr. Harold Koenig at Duke University, whose research on religion and health spans decades and hundreds of published studies, found that people with deep personal faith show measurably lower rates of depression and anxiety. In fact, multiple large-scale analyses in this field have found that regular spiritual practice correlates with significantly reduced risk of depressive episodes, with some studies showing reductions of up to 30% in certain populations. But the benefits extend well beyond mental health metrics. The same body of research documents stronger resilience in the face of loss and trauma, a greater capacity to find meaning inside suffering rather than being destroyed by it, and significantly higher reported levels of purpose and life satisfaction across every demographic studied. But beyond all the clinical data, there is something the research captures that is harder to measure but impossible to miss in the people who carry it. A specific quality of inner stability, a groundedness that does not depend on external circumstances going well, a peace that, as believers themselves consistently describe it, does not make logical sense given what they are sometimes facing. Psychologists call this existential security, the felt sense that life has meaning, that one is known and held by something that does not change. And research shows this quality of inner security is one of the most powerful predictors of psychological resilience and long-term well-being ever identified. So why does belief in Jesus Christ go so much deeper for so many people than simply following a set of rules or attending a weekly service? Because at its psychological core, belief in Jesus Christ addresses the four deepest questions the human mind has ever asked. And it addresses all four simultaneously. Who am I? The believer has an answer. They are known, named, loved unconditionally by the one who created them. Their identity does not depend on performance, achievement, or the approval of other people. Why am I here? The believer has an answer. There is purpose, there is calling. Their existence is not accidental, and their life is not without direction or meaning. Why do I suffer? The believer has an answer that is psychologically distinctive from almost every other meaning-making framework. They believe in a God who did not observe human suffering from a distance but entered it fully. Psychologically, this does not ask the believer to avoid pain or pretend it does not exist. It gives them a framework for finding profound and transformative meaning inside their suffering, rather than being destroyed by it. What happens when I die? The believer has an answer. And that answer addresses the existential terror that quietly underlies so much of human anxiety and psychological distress in a way that no other framework fully resolves. Dr. Clay Routledge, whose research focuses on existential psychology and meaning, found that across cultures and demographics, the single greatest predictor of psychological well-being is not wealth or health or relationship status, it is meaning, the felt sense that life points somewhere, that it matters beyond the individual moment. For people who believe in Jesus Christ, that meaning is not something constructed through personal effort or philosophical reasoning, it is something received, given. And the psychological stability that flows from that received meaning is one of the most powerful forces in human mental life. Here is what the research ultimately says, and it deserves to be stated clearly and without qualification. People who believe deeply in Jesus Christ are not believing because they are weak. They are not believing because they cannot face reality. They are not believing because they have never thought carefully or critically about the world. In many cases, they are believing because they have thought more carefully about the world than most. Because they have sat with the heaviest questions human existence raises, the questions about suffering, identity, meaning, and death, and found in Jesus Christ answers that nothing else fully provided. Dr. Kenneth Pargament at Bowling Green State University, whose research on faith as a psychological framework, found that for people with deep belief in Jesus Christ, religion is not an escape from reality. It is a way of engaging with reality at its most difficult and most meaningful level. It provides not just comfort, but a complete framework for understanding what it means to be human, broken, beloved, and held at the same time. What distinguishes belief in Jesus Christ from other meaning-making systems psychologically is this. It does not ask the believer to resolve the tension between suffering and love. It places that tension at the very center of its story, and it says that the tension itself is precisely where the deepest transformation happens. That is not a naive framework. That is one of the most psychologically sophisticated responses to the human condition ever constructed. So if you are someone who believes deeply in Jesus Christ, this is what psychology and neuroscience want you to know. What you experience in prayer is real. What you feel in worship is measurable. The peace, the presence, the sense of being unconditionally known and loved, these are not wishful thinking. They are among the most profound experiences the human brain and heart are capable of producing. And the research documenting their effects on human well-being is among the most consistent and replicated in the entire field. And if you are someone who does not share this belief but has always wondered what is genuinely happening inside the minds and hearts of people who do, now you have a more complete answer, not a final answer. Science does not deal in final answers when it comes to the deepest questions of human existence, but an honest one, a rigorous one that treats the experience of belief with the intellectual seriousness it has always deserved. Because whatever your own position on faith, the fact that billions of human beings across every culture, every century, every level of education and intellectual sophistication have found in one figure something that transformed their lives, carried them through unimaginable suffering, and given them a quality of peace and meaning that nothing else provided. That is not coincidence, that is not weakness, that is not delusion, that is one of the most enduring and remarkable psychological phenomena in the entire history of the human race. And it deserves to be understood. If this gave you something meaningful to think about, leave a comment below. I read every single one.